Thank you. Starting my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Let's examine the rhetoric of side opposition because they seem to be moving the goalpost. The first speaker was like, "Yeah, it's fine, bro. We have China, we have Japan, we can go to war, Pol Pot, Cambodia." The second speaker attempts to engage with us and says, "Yes, it's not perfect," and then talk about the idea of innovation, which we think we preempted in the top of our speech. I don't think growth, innovation, and the capacity to challenge incentive structures is proof that neoliberalism has succeeded. At best, it's an attempt to symmetricize the harms that we prove to you consistently coming from side proposition. The third speaker attempts to move the goalpost even further, and that in itself is an attempt to wash their hands clean of the failure of neoliberalism. Because the promise back in the 80s, because of the rise of globalization, was that everything was going to be great and fine. But as an average person, if you take a look at the huge swaths of conflict, the wealth inequality, and the struggle of the urban poor and the desolate particular people who are most affected by this, we think it's clearly a failure. A couple of reasons why their side cannot take this debate. The first is, let's examine their claims. They had three broad pushes. A, the growth and existence of developing nations. B, innovation and capacity. C, free trade being a good thing. These are true, but to a large extent, uncomparative and asserted. It misses the nuance to neoliberalism because we were clear about the capitalist incentive structure it creates, and what Brent and Matthew had said can still happen on our comparative, wherein we took a higher burden and talked about the idea of protectionism, the fact that markets to a large extent should and have to be regulated, and how nation states do have to be involved. But their defense was that, bro, ganun talaga. There are some nations which are poor. There are some nations which have a shitty governance. It's not neoliberalism's fault. It's their fault. But like what we told you coming from our case line, it's precisely because of those weak and nascent institutions that America and other hegemonic powers were able to use to their advantage to be able to literally go into resource war, direct war, and proxy war for these nations under the guise of capitalism and the free hand being good, but in reality, it was Uncle Sam's conniving and doing. The next thing I have to say, compared to their side, is if they don't really have a positive material or defense of neoliberalism. At best, they try to symmetricize the harm and say that it hasn't failed. This, at best, is competing analysis in an attempt to symmetricize their case, but no response or nuance to what we gave you uniquely about why neoliberalism has largely led to metropolitan areas being plunged into poverty and huge swaths of people being wrecked by the zero-sum game and perverse incentive structure at the heart of capitalism, which serves as the very backbone and motivation of neoliberalism. Ladies and gentlemen, the rich people have every incentive to use the middle class and the poor to bolster and create the wealth divide. The middle class are unable to buy homes and get out of the rat race. And the poor, the most vulnerable, live on a hand-to-mouth existence at the mercy of the state. The very state that has failed them, the very state that got wrecked by neoliberalism and capitalist forces. We are very proud to stand on side proposition.